Hey everybody, how are you today? I hope you're well. I wanted to talk about something which I think is pretty prominent on the internet today and in society writ large, which is defeatism. The idea that there are things which you cannot do simply because you cannot do them. Now, I don't think it takes a rocket scientist to figure out the idea that sometimes you just need to find a method that works for you, depending on what you're trying to do. Like, say, for example, you really want to start lifting weights. There's nothing physically impeding you from lifting weights, assuming you're, you know, a relatively normal person. Um, you have all your arms together and everything. But the actual act of being consistent at that is what you need to work on, right? That doesn't mean that you need to lift a crazy amount every day. In fact, you should probably lift very little to start with because your body's not going to be used to it. But that is to say, you do a little bit every day, and if you feel your body kind of needing to recuperate, you take a day or two to let your muscles get back to normal, then you get right back to it. You put reminders on your phone, you stick reminders all over your room if you have to, tape them up, make yourself think about it somehow, and then do at least a little bit. Even if you don't fulfill your goal, like let's say you want to start out doing 10 or 15 reps a day or something, just do something, right? Just do something so that you have it in your mind that this is a habit, and then continue doing it from there. Now, the reason I picked the example of just picking up some shit and then lifting it is because that is literally the simplest thing a person can do. Like, that does not really require any major mental effort, but it nonetheless is a daunting task for many people. Many people are intimidated by the idea of developing that consistency. But I want to broaden this out to whether or not you want to learn guitar or some other skill, perhaps a language. These are all things which also require consistency in order for you to get good at them. And the only way to actually do that is to do it every day. You have to do it every day. Even if you're not doing as much as you'd like, try to start out with realistic goals, because obviously you're just starting out. You went from doing nothing to now doing something. You're not going to be able to do massive amounts all of a sudden. You have to, look at yourself from where you're at and come up with a plan that is tailored to those circumstances. From there on, you do little by little, gradually increasing more over time until all of a sudden you find yourself doing a lot every day. But the most important thing is keeping up the consistency. The consistency is key. The consistency is absolutely key. Moreover, not giving up is key, right? When a lot of people are learning a language, they start out using certain methods that don't really work for them. They're doing grammar exercises, or they're reading books that aren't particularly appealing to them. And I always say, try a couple different methods. Try a couple different systems out. Try and find what's enjoyable to you. Try and find what you like doing. Get that base vocabulary set up, start out with the Anki to try and mine as many pieces of vocabulary as you can, the most common phrases, words, etc. And then try to graduate on to listening and reading as quickly as possible so that you can start listening and reading to content which appeals to you. If you're consuming content which appeals to you, even if you don't understand most of it, you're having to look up a lot of words, you're still going to be motivated because you're being enchanted by the content that you're consuming, right? You're having fun with it. You're not really thinking about the fact that you're working, you're just enjoying what you're doing. Now, that's a very effective way of going about it. It's a way that works for a lot of people. I don't know if it would work for you. Maybe you like doing things the more traditional way. But um, the point there is to find out what works for you. Don't give up just because one way of doing things isn't working out. But moreover, don't give up just because one way of thinking about things isn't working out. Oftentimes our mindset about what we're doing is the biggest barrier to what we're trying to achieve. Now, a good example of this from my life is when I was in school and also when I was out of school. I often had goals and aspirations to do big things, right? I was always very into languages. It appears as though I'm being called on element, but I'm going to finish this video first. I was always very into languages. I first tried learning Spanish when I was 7 years old using my brother's cassette tapes. Cassette tapes which were gifted to him by my grandfather, who was from California. And I was interested in the language from hearing him try to speak it and hearing him do his homework. So I took the cassettes and I was just listening to them underneath the bed. And I remember, my parents kind of making fun of me because they heard me trying to order alcohol after repeating what was on the cassettes. And of course, my dad made fun of my accent and everything. He had this odd thing where he thought it was cringeworthy that I was trying to imitate the way that the people sound, even though that's literally what everyone tries to do when they speak a language. Like, that's what you're supposed to do. But he had that personal insecurity that he tried to impose on me, which he actually ended up doing again later. When I was 12, I really wanted to learn Norwegian, the bookmal variety. And so I had this online program that I was using that I found for free that allowed me to practice the vocabulary and the sentences, and I was writing them all down. I was finding these words and sounds very enchanting. I showed him the work that I was doing, instantly shut me down. He was like, you're, without even hearing the language before, most likely, he was like, your pronunciation is all wrong. Why are you doing this? Why can't you do something else with your time? Like, really just ripping into me, right? In spite of, me doing something which was developing my brain, right? Like, learning any language is going to be objectively good for forming new neural connections, preventing the onset of dementia and Alzheimer's later in life, expanding empathy for other people through being able to connect more with their perspective, etc. And so learning a language, no matter what language it is an inherently good thing to do. I mean, think about it. The vast majority of the world's population can speak another language than their own. And so if you're monolingual, you're literally like at the bottom of society. Like, by definition, you are already failing. And so by even trying to learn a different one, even if it's not a particularly popular one, even if it's not one spoken by a lot of people, you are doing an inherently good thing. And so was I at that time. But here he was, actively attempting to discourage me and to get me to quit. Same thing happened again when I tried Vietnamese when I was 13, and he was a little bit more supportive when I was trying to do Japanese when I was 14, but still a lot of the same stuff. And ended up happening again when I tried to do Japanese again when I was 17. But oddly enough, during that time, I ended up getting further than I had ever before. And that was in spite of myself, right? I spent a month and a half on it and often felt overwhelmed and frustrated with and by my mistakes, but I still kept pressing on. I kept pressing on until life got in the way, right? I had to go back to high school, sort of, and there were also like a lot of personal issues happening at the time, a lot of economic issues I was facing. I grew up very poor. I still am pretty poor. My disability doesn't cover everything, but I got pretty far. I learned about 1,500 kanji. I could read and write about 1,500 kanji. and or at least recognize them. I knew vaguely what they meant. And this was just from a month and a half of intensive study, using Anki, using James Heisig's, remembering the kanji. But there I gave up, you know? And I think my mindset also partially had something to do with it, because for as much fun as I was having, as much as I loved learning the language and the process of language acquisition, I I also, couldn't help but have that fear of failure in the back of my head. I had to like consciously convince myself that what I was doing, was okay, that I could make all these mistakes. Whereas when I learned Spanish, and when I started learning Spanish last year, in June, I did not end up facing the same issue. I didn't have to remind myself that mistakes are okay. I just made the mistakes, and then that was that. And the reason I could do that was because my mindset had adjusted in a way to mirror more like how I view Dark Souls. I've played a lot of the Souls games. I've played a lot of very hard games in general. I don't get frustrated when I play video games. I don't get frustrated when I die, when I get to a hard boss. How the hell would I have been able to beat Ninja Gaiden on the NES? So I play and then go again and again and again and again until I succeed. And that's the mindset you have to have with languages, or with anything really that you're doing, where you're going to be prone to make mistakes. You can't acquire the knowledge if you're worried about making mistakes. You have to embrace the mistakes and then learn from them in order to improve. And that has to be an intuitive process. And it wasn't for me when I, did my most successful experiment with Japanese. That was not a thing that I was cognizant of. And so throughout my life, like my entire life at this point, I have had a fascination with languages. I've always watched polyglot YouTubers and linguist YouTube channels where they compare and contrast the lineage of different languages and the sounds present therein, and talk about the anthropology behind different languages. I've always found this stuff absolutely fascinating. I want to know as much of the lore as possible about languages. This has been one of my special interests. I'm talking about autism now. I am autistic, diagnosed, and I have autism. When an autistic person has a special interest, they want to dedicate their whole life and their whole routine to that. They're completely obsessed. It's the object of their obsession. And languages is one of those special interests for me. It has been forever. But a critical barrier for me to language acquisition has been self-esteem and how I viewed myself and what I was doing. So it's like I took something that I enjoyed and I destroyed it. I destroyed it by criticizing myself, by having a negative attitude. But by utilizing this Dark Souls analogy, by seeing the process of language acquisition the same way that I see Dark Souls, I was able to just take the good without the bad. So discard the bad, which wasn't inherent to anything about what I was doing, but was more so a product of my mindset. Throw that away, and then just take the good, which is getting to learn these new words, which I love doing, getting to be exposed to the content, to the grammar, to the structures, etc. And this kind of unvarnished, pure, like enjoyable love experience now gets to be my experience. But that is only because I changed my mindset. And so all of this is to say, you may have a great many things that you actually like, but something in your mindset is preventing you from really being able to enjoy it. And I had a big inspiration from my mom as well, because as she was pursuing her bachelor's in business, and she's been a huge fan of business administration and all of the different components of that, there my dad was yelling at her and criticizing her for what she was doing, calling her worthless, saying that she'll never amount to anything, which is kind of funny given the fact that he didn't even graduate high school, right? Like, why is he talking down at this intelligent woman for trying to make something better for herself? Um, but that was nonetheless what was occurring. And she just pressed through, soldiered on, and focused on her area of interest and ended up graduating at the top of her class. So the idea that you can't do it is just not true. You know, you can. There is nothing physically impeding you from doing it. It's you. It could be the environment that you've created for yourself. You know, perhaps you need to begin studying or working out or whatever you want to do first thing in the morning. That's what I do. As soon as I wake up, I do the Anki and I do the other work related to language acquisition. And that gets me in a good mood through the rest of the day because immediately I will have accomplished something. And that's a part of mindset too, right? The way that you choose to orient your life. That's going to have an impact on your mindset. It's also a product of your mindset. I'm trying to think of something else which may be helpful. Oh yeah, the people that you talk to. You know, if you're surrounded by really unproductive, kind of lazy, unmotivated, negative people, that mindset is likely to rub off on you. But if you're talking to people who are motivated, who are all pursuing similar things to you or the same things as you, then you're all going to positively reinforce one another, and this is going to lead you to have better outcomes in life. You know, you don't want to be in with a bad crowd. So that's going to impact mindset as well. It's also a product of mindset. So there's a lot there. I don't necessarily have time to cover it all in this one video, but what I really, really want to stress here, what I really want to get across is this idea that how we think of ourselves and conceive of the world around us is often a product of what we do, and it's a product of how we let our thoughts go. You know, how we let our thoughts run, how we let them how do I put this, develop, right? If I were to say something negative about myself, like I cannot learn, at the time I wanted to learn Norwegian when I was 12. I can't learn Norwegian. Why? Well, because I'm just bad at it. Why? Because my dad said so. If I take that whole train of thought and I run with that, and that is my belief about myself, of course I'm not going to do anything because I've just learned helplessness. But if I were to take another approach, such as to say, why did he say that? Well, probably because he's insecure, probably because he doesn't like the idea of his own son being more successful than him at something. It's the same reason why over time he began discouraging me from reading. He didn't like me engaging in extracurricular or intellectual activities, and probably because he could tell I was smarter than him. I mean, that's what my mom always told me. Maybe she had a point there. That's what his siblings, members of his own family, have told me. People who are actually successful, lawyers, educators, etc. And so, it's important to take these things in context. You cannot have your view of yourself defined by how other people see you. And I had to learn that the hard way. And part of learning that the hard way is actually seeing the results of your own efforts, but you have to put the effort in to see those results. And at the start, that's difficult. When you're just starting out and you're building these positive habits, you're going to run into some trouble. You're going to face the first, and most backlash in that month, that first month of you doing this thing consistently, whatever it is for you. But after that month has passed, you're going to be great. You're going to be aces. After that month and a half, after those 2 months, those 3 months that pass, you're going to be all ready to go. 6 months for sure. But you got to take it day by day. And, you've got to let the habit develop. Just take each battle individually. Don't think of it like I have 200 cards in Anki to do right now. Think of it as I have this card to do in Anki right now. Wow, I succeeded, I improved. That was a win. And then instead of thinking of it like 200 things that you ought to do at some point, now you have 200 different wins under your belt that you have made consecutively over time, right? By treating each of them as an individual win, focusing in on that one thing, honing in on that one thing, you have now developed an impressive streak of victories just in one day. It's little things like this, but positive contributions to your own thinking that are going to go such a long way. But they have to be paired with practical changes in your behavior, which all starts with habits and all kind of centers around habits, right? Building these positive habits. And you can't give up. You can't give up during that first critical stretch of time in which all of this is so new. You just got to keep going, have that healthy mindset, just, soldier on through, and you're going to be so much happier afterwards. So that's that.